Welcome to this wonderful event. Today we have Cody Bates, who is going to be our PDM speaker tonight. Cody has 25 years of material sales and specific product development in the plastics industry. He specializes in custom material formulations of thermoplastic resins. For the last 24 years, he has been doing this on his own in conjunction with the 10 plastics companies he currently represents. Management of waste collection, treatment and disposal facility under state and national agencies for RCRA, regulated hazardous and non-hazardous waste from a wide array of industries, consulting on waste contamination and material spills, both the point and non-point source. Expert witness for contested public hearings at the Railroad Commission of Texas, the organization that oversees the Texas oil and gas industry. Cody's presentation is called The Great Slowdown and How It Affects All of Us. And Cody, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So that sort of covers who I am, and I will tell you a little bit about how I started down this path with y'all. So I work with Devin Gibbs, y'all's members, and I put out a newsletter every month to the entire plastics industry. And it started out just a few people when I would hear some interesting news that I didn't think quite made sense, getting a price increase letter from a supplier when I knew the market was really going down. And I would kind of send out a note to people and they would say, hey, I would tell them, hey, the market's really going down. It's not going up. They're lying. Don't believe it. And do all of this, never taking myself too seriously. So my list spread from 2 to 4 to 8 to 16 to 32. And if you follow the linear progression of people saying, hey, would you add me to your list? Would you put me on it? And it started out monthly. And where I am now, I send out a newsletter to about 2,300 people monthly. Well, actually, I send it out weekly right now because of the changes are so dynamic in the supply market. And what I cover is not only plastics, but within this newsletter, I call it the state of the market. And it's just kind of what's going on in the entire plastics market. But I have a section in there where I cover kind of events going on nationally, internationally, and how those affect the entire supply chain and how they affect the price of plastics and what's going to happen. I once read that if you're well informed, you make the best decisions you can, and people can't get mad at you. So what I try to do is help all 2,300 people on this list read it and understand it and know what's coming around the next corner. I have friends who help me get set up in this, and they say a good read rate on a newsletter that you send out is somewhere between 3 and 5%. And total reads every month on the 2,300 letters, I have or emails that get sent out. I probably have, I don't know, 1,800 to 2,000 reads on it from people forwarding it on and all of that. I can see the metrics. So a lot of people are out there reading the BS that I kind of spit out. One of the things I don't do is I don't take myself very seriously. And I think that kind of helps people understand what I'm trying to get across, that I'm not just, let me put it this way. I put on a collared shirt to come speak to y'all tonight. So how that ties in tonight, what I'd like for y'all to do is if y'all have any questions as I go along, feel free to interrupt me. I can do that or take a note and ask me at the end. I kind of cover, I kind of have an outline of a lot of things that I like to cover and how I think they'd affect y'all. But if I miss something, let me know at the end, and I'll go into talk about it, and we'll see. So with that being said, the thing that I'm going to talk to you all about tonight, and I don't want anyone to feel bad or feel like they need to call a crisis hotline after we're done, but it's kind of the state of the market and what the economy is doing right now. As I read, I in my newsletter, I put this out a few weeks ago. The definition of a recession is 2 quarters of negative growth in the GDP. And I listen to NPR in the mornings because I think I get some interesting perspective. And last week they said there was a survey done of CEOs, and 91% thought we were going to go into a recession next year. Well, by the standard definition of what a recession is, we have technically been in one for the last 2 quarters. We had negative GDP growth in the first quarter, and we had negative GDP growth in the second quarter. And the reason I think that's important to understand, from whatever materials you're looking at in your supply chain, I often see raw materials like plastics, metals, parts, nuts, bolts, those type of things. We're the point of the sword as far as the economy goes. So when you're looking at manufacturing, the rate at which we are manufacturing in the United States determines what the state of our economy is like, because we are a consumer-driven economy. As people buy things, they drive our economy. And when people buy more, they spend more, things get sold, things get built, things get made. We have to go buy stuff for our companies. We have to sell things. It's a revolving cycle. And so the interesting thing that I found in the entire supply chain is if you go back a mere 2 years, what we hear in the news and what we see is either really late, really slow, really dumb, or really wrong. And I can't figure out what's happening. So before the last election, all we heard in the fall of 2020 was how bad the economy was, how slow things were going. During October of 2020, the United States made, produced, and sold more polypropylene, which is a disposable consumer item. They made the most polypropylene in the history of production in the US. And during the fall, as I'm sure y'all see in most of y'all's businesses, the procurement of raw materials generally trends down from October through November and December as companies don't want to carry end of the year inventories. We had the most polypropylene ever sold in the US in October. And I looked around and thought, wow, the economy's really rocking. This isn't right. In November, we had a price increase on polypropylene, not due to increased raw material costs, but due to demand. And that made me really scratch my head. Well, in December, we had another price increase, which has never happened in polypropylene, and it was occurring in other materials, polyethylenes, nylons, polycarbonates, other thermoplastics. But I really saw that trend in polypropylene and followed it. In January, you had the standard ramp up of orders from OEMs to producers of plastic parts and other parts. And so we got yet another round of increases, 3 rounds of increases in the price of polypropylene in the span of 3 months, 2 of which are the slowest months in the year. That was unprecedented, and that was solely demand-driven price increases. The producers were expanding their margins, they were charging more, but demand was there. Then we had the freeze hit in the spring of 2021, in February. What that did to the entire business climate in the US is that's what really started driving our inflation. We had incredible demand, and then we had a shortage in supply. And that occurred across plastics, that occurred across chemicals, that occurred across a lot of metals. And the reason because of that, the reason that caused that was normally when you have a crisis in something like plastics, it's due to a natural disaster, a hurricane, hits Lake Charles, Louisiana, and takes out a bunch of plants. Something happens, you have an explosion at one plant. And when you have things occur in plastics, it takes a while to shut a plant down, a chemical plant, a plastics plant, and purge the lines out and get everything ready for a shutdown. It usually takes about 48 hours. If a hurricane's coming in the Gulf and it's aimed at Lake Charles, they start shutting down plants 48 hours before it hits. That way they can purge everything. Once the danger passes, they fire everything back up and they start production again. Takes them about 2 weeks to get back up on spec on making chemicals or plastics or whatever they're doing. So they're really down about 3 weeks. Happened during the freeze that occurred in Texas where we had the massive power shutdown is they had about 45 minutes to go turn their plants off. That's the warning they got, not 48 hours. So they went and turned the keys off and the whole plant shut down and gummed up with everything in the reactors and the lines. And basically they gummed the entire plants up. And this is at a time in February of 2021 when there was incredible demand, incredible production, everything was on the way up. So that created massive shortages in plastics, in chemicals. And what normally happens is if you have a massive disaster in Beaumont, Texas, because of a hurricane, and you're a plant up in Minnesota and you're making soap and you get one of your key components that you need a chemical out of Beaumont for making soap, that chemical gets shut down out of Beaumont because of the hurricane. Well, that's all fine and good because you've got a backup supplier in Houston, you've got a backup supplier along the Mississippi, you can get it from another chemical supplier. This shortage shut down the entire petrochemical industry in Texas and Louisiana for a couple of months. And this is at a time of record demand. So what you've had is a backlog of these people, high demand, they can't catch up, demand is just going nuts. And this is through the pandemic where people are sitting at home, finally learning how to use their computer and ordering everything they can find on Amazon that they think is cool. They're not spending money on traveling. They're not spending money on going out. They're doing home repairs. They're buying Nintendos. They're buying stuff for their backyard. They're doing all kinds of things that consume products that our companies produce. This is great for the economy. Well, starting this year, we went into what I'm kind of calling the great slowdown. Okay. And so prices finally hit their mark and the rate of inflation, once again, I covered this in my letters, the rate of inflation as put out by the government is mid 9% year on year. I challenge you, and that going back a couple of months when they were claiming it was 9%, to find anything that you buy that's gone up only 9%. Natural gas, oil, lumber, home goods, plastics, food, clothing, whatever you can think of has gone up more than 9%. Okay. I think that number is totally wrong. Cost of plastics, they doubled. The cost of fuel doubled. The cost of natural gas went up by 4 times. Electricity gone up. Everything gone up, gone up, gone up. And so what that's done is it has caused a big pullback in consumer spending. Okay. Most of our consumers out there are people like you and me that a large part of their disposable income goes towards buying things. Okay. Hence disposable income. The other reason these people have so much disposable income is, yes, they're saving, but the value of their homes are going up quite a bit. And we all felt, if we own our own homes, you felt very home rich. Your neighbor just sold his house for $50,000 more than it was worth last year. The guy around the corner sold it for $100,000 more. Suddenly you're sitting in a home that you think is worth $75,000 to $100,000 more than it was a year ago. That's great. I'm home rich. So all of these things contributed to great consumer sentiment, and everyone went out and spent. So food costs go up, heating prices go up, cooling prices go up. your Big Mac goes up, your Whataburger, I'm from the South, gotta love Whataburger. Your cost of your Whataburger goes up, everything goes up, including gasoline, which we all spend a lot of money on. Price of that doubles. So all of a sudden, your disposable income has shrunk significantly as a consumer. So what that's done is in the supply chain side of things, we went to extremely long lead times for products. And I mean, from raw materials to the, like, and consider an automotive, if it takes a long time to get a specific nylon to make an automotive component, and that's got to go in to a tier 2, the tier 2 makes a part that goes to the tier 1, the tier 1 assembles that and sends it up to the OEM who's making the Nissan cars, then that long supply chain has gotten very, very long. Well, as a purchasing agent, you have put in orders because you're getting 6-month lead times on your raw materials. So you've put in purchase orders for the next 6 months. Those purchase orders, now your front end orders have stagnated and people are starting to cancel orders with their material producers, okay? Because consumers have slowed down their buying process. The material suppliers who have been giving these long lead times are suddenly backed up with material. And in the raw plastic material side, all of the distributors were getting their material in from the chemical companies that are making it. And they're sending it on down the line to all their like plastic injection molders. So if you were ordering 10,000 pounds a month of material and you've had it forecast out for 6 months, suddenly that all shows up at the distributor's warehouse and they took it and shoved it down your throat in 6 weeks instead of 6 months. And so on the other side, when they're looking for orders from their customers, such as a Black & Decker, Black & Decker's not selling any drills right now. People just aren't buying them. Consumer sentiment is down. So they're calling the OEM, I mean, the manufacturers, their tier 1s and tier 2s who are assembling the drills and saying, hey, don't send us any more handles or motors. Stop, because we're oversupplied. We're over inventory. And you see that in the news a lot where they talk about how much inventory there is, how much material is stacked up in warehouses right now. And that's true. I think we're all seeing that. And so what that's doing to us is that's creating backups in the whole scheme of production, supply, all of that, all the way down through the chain. And no one's making big Christmas orders this year at Walmart. Target's not ordering a whole bunch of G.I. Joe with a Kung Fu grip because they're stocked up, because no one is purchasing and no one is buying that. And so I go back to the reasons for why that is, because I think it's important to know where we're at, to know where we're going. Okay. So you've got great increases in inflation. Okay. And interest rates are being jacked up by 3/4 of a point where they usually move 1/4 or 1/2 point. You've got the Fed now is jacking interest rates up 3/4 of a point every time they can see each other. And so what that's doing is that's increasing borrowing costs across the board in an effort to cool down the economy. Okay. Once again, I think the Fed has done enough. I think they need to stop, because I think all of their data is delayed. I think it's skewed, and I think it's hurting all of us in the long run. If you look at what interest rates are doing to the common purchaser, which is who we're all trying to supply in the end, the consumer, that consumer is looking at his house and he says, okay, for $2,400 a month in mortgage payment, 2 years ago, I could buy a $500,000 house. Today, for that same $2,400, I can go buy about a $310,000 house. So the house that I want to go buy and put the white picket fence around and raise my family in, I suddenly can't buy a $500,000 house. I've got to buy a $310,000 house. And I think the interest rates are going to continue to go up. So the cost of houses is slowly starting to fall, but it's going to start tumbling faster and faster and faster and get back down to a level that we can all afford. Okay. So what does that do to the people sitting in their house? They were out spending their disposable income and they were sitting on a bunch of equity in their home because they were now house rich. Well, they're not stupid because their $500,000 house, there's not as many people to buy it now. So they're feeling house poor because the money that they could have sold it for, they can't right now. And even though they didn't lose any money, they felt like they lost some on paper. Another factor, the NASDAQ hit a record, a 52-week low today. The S&P 500 hit a 52-week low today. That makes people feel pretty bad when they look at their IRAs and go, wow, I've lost all this money. Unless you're retiring, you haven't lost it yet. It's going down. If you're putting money in, your dollar cost averaging, you're actually going to make money when the market goes back up. It always goes back up, but people are freaked out. So, and I'm sorry if I've got you all depressed at this point, but unfortunately, I'm kind of not done yet. So what has that done for us as far as that's kind of the domestic market, okay? On the foreign markets, because when Europe sneezes or China sneezes, the whole world catches a cold, okay? So you look at what's going on in China right now. China's having a housing crisis. There's massive debt in their housing market, which is causing the government to have to go in and backstop their banks because their banks are having to backstop their property developers who are not selling all of these homes that they've produced. The Chinese government, through their one-child policy, has brought the number of working age people that are coming up through their system down. The rate of replacement or the rate of fecundity that it takes for a population to sustain itself is like 1.2 kids per female within the population. China's rate of replacement right now is like 1.1, I think. Those were the latest numbers that I saw. So the number of workers coming up through China for the next few years is kind of like what's going on in Japan right now, where they have a very old population and a very small young population. And they've been in a state of stagflation for the last 20, 30 years when Japan was a big world power 20 or 30 years ago. So China is dealing with that. China also has the zero COVID policy, which whenever they have a COVID outbreak, they go lock the whole city down. Well, their version of city and our version of cities are a little different since they have 1.2 billion people. A normal city over there is 15 to 20 million people. So they're going in and locking down mass numbers of people, 100, 200 million at a time. And they just had their largest daily number of COVID cases of 2,000 yesterday. I think it was Monday in China, so our Sunday, which is not a lot for here, but for them, they're going through and continuing to do these lockdowns. When they do these lockdowns, you can't get the bolts that you need. You can't get the particular nuts, the screws, this color of yellow pigment, whatever it may be. It's creating all of these problems, and their demand is shrinking as well for consumer goods. From the other big market that you have to look at is Europe. And we have a full-blown, no holds barred land war in Europe. We've got saber rattling of nuclear war. And I really don't know what's going to happen. I've kind of been fixated on it and watching it a lot because I think it's pretty amazing to watch a war in real time, which you can on Twitter and all of these feeds and stuff. And you've got Vladimir Putin backed into a corner. And there's no real way out for him. He's going to throw more people at it. He's going to continue to be defeated because or continue to face setbacks because the West is providing arms. And so this is an increasing arms race, Cold War scenario playing out as a real land war in Europe. And it's I don't know where it's going to go, but it's going to get worse from here. So you've had blowups of the Nord Stream pipelines in the last couple of weeks, which supply gas to Europe. that's an effort to freeze Europe out by somebody this winter and force their hand. I don't know who did it. I have speculation, but I don't really know. You've got an interesting caveat that no one's really talking about. So most of the countries in Europe and some in Africa, we are not, are signatories to the International Criminal Court. When the ICC declares that someone has committed a war crime and provides sanctions against those people, the signatories of the International Criminal Court may not remove the sanctions until the settlement of those war crime claims. Okay. What that means is any sanction that has been put in place by the European Union as a whole against Russia cannot be lifted until the war crimes that Russia has been accused of by the International Criminal Court have been addressed. Therefore, the sanctions against oil, gas, iron, gold, refined fuels, whatever's wheat, whatever's coming out of Russia to go to those markets can't be bought by those markets until all of those claims against the Russian government, Vladimir Putin himself, and whoever else they decide to charge are settled. That means that the supply problems in Europe are here for a long time. With the increases in the cost of raw materials, particularly like petrochemicals, increases in the cost of copper and nickel, which are used in batteries, stainless steel, you're losing a lot of production of the raw materials that we need that potentially come out of Europe, or that Europe needs to continue their own manufacturing there, are going to slow way down. Therefore, they're going to pull more resources from the rest of the world, from the United States, from Asia, wherever they can get them. But we have a very strong dollar here in the US right now. So the cost of imports from Asia are cheap from us, but the cost of exports from here for others to buy them are very expensive. The British pound is the weakest it's ever been in recorded our history. The euro is at its lowest level it's ever been against the dollar. The yen is down. The Chinese currency is down against the US dollar. So we can go buy a lot, but we don't need it right now. And that's going to be a very bad thing moving forward. So are very difficult for us moving forward as being in the supply chain to deal with and be able to tell our customers, hey, you know, prices are going up. OPEC just cut production by 2 million barrels a day. And that's going to drive oil prices up, because most of the dollars that OPEC countries and almost all countries make by selling oil go directly into their national treasury. In the US, they go to the companies that pull the oil out of the ground, or the royalty owners of that land, where in foreign countries, that all goes into the government coffers. And most of them need high dollar return, high cost of oil to balance their budgets. Without it, they're not balancing their budgets. They've made a whole lot of money in the last year with $100 oil, and they kind of want to get back there and really don't care what happens to the US at that rate. Okay. So kind of trying to put it in a nutshell, for that's where we are right now. But what does that mean for where we're going as being in the supply chain? Okay. I think that we're going to continue to slow through the end of the year. I think that if the Fed continues to raise interest rates like they're doing, it is going to hurt our economy yet more than it is. And I think they've achieved the desired cooling effect that they've wanted. I don't think that they're seeing the real data. And the data in it that they're getting is delayed. And I think they're going to swing the pendulum too far in increasing interest rates and get us to a point where they have to come in and try to rapidly decrease rates in order to jumpstart the economy again. I think that with the slowing economy, we are going to continue to see falls in commodities from, lumber's already come down, PVC, which goes into a bunch of homes, that's come down. I think your plastics are going to come down. I think other sources for things like copper not coming out of Russia are going to come down. So I believe that's going to help us on the supply side, bring the cost down. Okay. Like I said, I think the Fed's going to go up at least another 3/4 point, if not another 1.5 in interest rates before someone over there goes, hey, the emperor has no clothes and we're in a hell of a mess here. The economy's going in the crapper. We need to jumpstart it. What can we do? Oh, let's start cutting the rates that we've just been increasing. I think this winter, we're going to see natural gas prices increase. The US has a lot of oil and natural gas to go get. The problem is, being in the industry, I know they can't go do it because they can't find people to work. No one wants to go to work. And I know an oil company down here in our backyard that wants to have 3 rigs drilling for natural gas down here. They have 1 rig that's coming because they can't find crews to man the rigs. No one will go to work at pretty much any price. And so that's causing a gum up in what we're able to produce. We're producing 12 million barrels a day in the US, but we consume far more than that. And that rate is not going to fall. You've got natural gas prices are so high right now, and electricity demand because in the world is increased because 1, people love air conditioning. And 2, through all of this manufacturing, electrification on electric cars and all of this that we're doing, the demand for electricity is more. No one's running out and building nuclear plants. The wind doesn't always blow and the sun doesn't shine at night. And we don't have good sources, a good way to store energy in batteries yet. And so the best backup baseload power source we have is natural gas. Europe is using it, but the equivalent in cost of natural gas, we pay about, we're about $7 right now, $8. We've been as high as $9 on our natural gas. Europe, they're anywhere between $30 and $40. China's about $30 for their natural gas. And that's going to continue to climb because we're not drilling it fast enough and exporting it. That cost, that creates increased costs for electricity, materials like polyethylene, a lot of our chemical bases that we use. So that's what's hurting us. Now, all of that being bad, a little bit of good. I don't wear a black hat the whole time. Next year, looking forward, I see a fall in rates, which will help try to spur consumer demand. That's going to come, but it's not going to come early in the year. We're going to get a jump in rates. I wouldn't expect to see that till probably second or third quarter. No one's even talking about it yet, but I really think that's kind of where we're going to go. I think that home prices are going to come down, make housing more affordable for people, but interest rates are going to have to fall so that that same $2,400 that you could buy a $500,000 house with is going to increase in what you could spend to buy a home that you want. Yes, they're throwing up starter homes, but the population of the US is increasing a lot, and we do have a big home demand. And so that's going to continue. The decrease in the cost of raw materials is going to help, but couple that, I think we're going to see a decrease in car costs, especially in the used car market, as more cars do come onto the market. And as you all have seen in the supply chain and getting things from China, from Asia, from India, with the increased price of ocean freight, that coming down, I think the next year we're going to continue to see the onshoring of jobs and more manufacturing here in the US. And so I think that's going to help us in the long run, obviously create more jobs if we can find people who really want to go to work. So kind of to wrap up what I'm saying, I think longer term than that, I think the reshoring is going to help us. I think we're going to produce more raw materials here in the US, particularly things like carbon, nano powdered carbon for our batteries, batteries here in the US, more solar panels here in the US. I think we're going to increase our rare earth production here in the US. I do see over the next few years, y'all please be ready for this. The push towards green and what we do on a daily basis as supplying things is going to trump price. People are going to pay more for a recycled polypropylene with worse properties than they are a new polypropylene. The drive for recycled content in anything from printers to cars to boxes for your food to wrap to anything is going to continue to increase. And those materials are available, but the demand will far exceed supply. So if you have any inkling that your supply chain needs greening, go do it now. Go secure the sources of those green materials, particularly in plastics and in anything that you can get. Metals has a good recycled supply chain. Plastics isn't good, but it's getting better. But go secure those now, because next year and the year after that and the year after that, it's going to be harder. We've all learned that the long supply chains, the long logistics chains suck. So I think the bringing and onshoring more of those logistics supply chains and the storing more of things here domestically and closer to where we need them is going to continue. Therefore, when ocean rates from China jump from $1,600 a container to 20,000, you don't get stung again. There will be certain things that people don't want to produce here in the US, pigments, flame retardants, carbon blacks, a lot of small nuts, bolts, things that they have ready supplies for over there. I think those are going to get ordered and stocked more here in the US to try and avoid some of this, but all that's going to come at a cost. But there's some supply chains like that we're not going to be able to break, but the ones that can be broken, I think those are going to help. I think that as states go towards further electrification and they try to electrify everything from tractors to lawnmowers to locomotives to anything that they can do and run electrically, I think logistics are going to get harder for us. Pulling up with an 18-wheeler and putting diesel in it and getting back on the road and driving the 8 hours they're allowed to drive is really easy. Pulling over and charging up a truck is very difficult. I know Ford just came out with their Lightning pickup truck, and you put a camper on the back of a brand new Lightning pickup truck and you can drive 80 miles for you're out of battery. That dog just won't hunt when it comes to 18-wheelers and how we get stuff from the last mile. And particularly the war in Ukraine, keep your eye on it, because as that gets worse, I think things are going to get harder, particularly for Europe, and how those things trail down to us and filter down to us. It's going to make supply chains more congested. I think materials are going to go more towards Europe because they're just not going to be able to produce because of the cost of their energy. They're going to be able to get more natural gas and oil in, and that should start to stabilize, but that's not going to happen for 9 months to at least a year, I think. And so for the next year, I think that's really going to weigh on us. So that's kind of my spiel in a nutshell. I don't want to sound like a Debbie Downer. Like I said, I mean, I don't want to drive anyone to drinking tonight, but it's it's kind of ugly. And I think the government's missing it. I think the Fed's missing it. I know the news media is missing it. But I'll offer this to y'all. Even if you're not in the plastics business, like I said, I have a section in my state of the market called Bigger Ideas. If you'd like to be included, my email is super easy. It's Cody Bates, just like my name on the screen, at hotmail.com. No periods or anything. So if you'd like, send me an email. I'd be happy to include you on the list. Right now, it's going out about once a week. If you don't care about the plastics, just skip down to the Bigger Ideas section. And I kind of cover 6 or 8 of these topics every week, trying to keep us all informed and try and keep everybody ahead, because I mean, not only does it matter for what you're doing as a job, but it matters for you and your family. If you really know that interest rates are going up, you know, maybe you don't need to go buy that new car right now and pay $100,000 for a new Chevy Suburban or pickup truck, which is ridiculous, and pay 6-7% interest when you can wait 6 months and buy one that's a year old and save a whole bunch of money. But please, if you have any questions, I'd love to dive into anything that I missed. I can't believe I missed anything, but I talk a lot, so fire away.
Hi, Cody.
Hi, Tony.
Hi. I actually work in food manufacturing. Specifically, we make hot dogs and sausages.
Okay.
And when the resin issue happened in Texas, one of our film suppliers was actually flying in. I believe it was the EVOH.
Yep.
They were flying that in, and we saw exactly what you were stating, just continual price hikes by month. And we have been trying to get ahead of all these situations. Another one for us has been corn syrup solids.
Mm-hmm.
So we've had to switch to liquid corn syrup, and we're trying to stay out far in front of everything, where our carrying costs are just through the roof right now. We really don't know how else to stay ahead of it because of how we are structured with our customer base as far as placing orders. So we're increasing our lead times too. But do you see any advantage to continually stocking up and just eating that additional carrying cost? I mean, obviously we're passing that down as much as we can, just like any other business. But do you see it continuing even as the economy slows?
So the bad part of my answer is yes. I see it somewhat continuing but the answer is kind of multifaceted because of like the 2 different things that you were dealing with. So for materials like EVOH, and for those of y'all who don't know, that's ethyl vinyl alcohol, and it's used as a barrier film to keep gases from migrating through plastic films. So the EVOH crisis obviously directly related to the freeze and people catching up. So there's a certain degree that you can barrier against that. Now, things like what you're seeing in the corn syrup and the corn syrup solids, what I see that due to is mostly the price jump in what we've seen for food because of the war in Ukraine. You've got Ukraine as a big supplier of sunflower oil. They're a big corn supplier, major supplier of wheat. And so as you pull these off of the market and they're stopped, you've got countries trying to replace that protein somehow. And things like corn syrup solids can be used in place of certain other sugars, starches, other things down the supply chain. So it's difficult to go in and stock up for those things. I think on the food side, you're going to get worse as the war gets worse, because I think the war is going to escalate. And I would not be surprised to see Russia hitting some food exporting ports with the cruise missiles that coming from the Black Sea and knock out some of the food transportation ability of Ukraine, which is going to increase the cost of things like soybeans, the cornstarch, all of that. I think that's going to, I think that's going to increase. But as far as the resin things that employ plastics, I think that should get better. Now, as far as like prices for things like that, those you're at an inflection point where those should be down, and you should be able to ask your suppliers for decreases. And for all of y'all involved, you know, no matter what we're doing, we specify what we need to buy, whether it's a plastic or whether it's a film barrier or whether it's this. The two greatest words that you can impart on any spec, no matter what it is, and implore those above you who have engineering degrees, who are somewhat the bane of our existence at times, to add these two words to any spec: or equivalent. If you can get that put on, it makes your job as a purchaser so much easier, because if you can prove it's an equivalent, you can make them use it. A lot of times they say, no, I want this spec'd in. You say, put the or equivalent on there, and that'll help get you out of a lot of the deal. Y'all were forced to use the syrup as a last resort, but if things like that were put on there, it'll help you get ahead of those things a little faster.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yep. Anyone else, feel free to jump in. I'm not scared to talk.
Well, to break the silence, let me just say, I don't have a question, but thank you very much for the time that you spent speaking to us today, Cody. I thought it was very informative. I'm not sure exactly how to assess everything that I learned today, right? From a professional perspective or a personal perspective, but I definitely feel more informed, and so I thank you for that.
Certainly, I appreciate that. And like I said, anyone that would like to sign up for my newsletter, feel free. I send it out. I'm happy to send it to more people. It's easy to do. Just shoot me an email. And
Cody Bates at hotmail.com.
That's it. Cody Bates at hotmail.com.
Cool.
And if during that, when you get that email, if there's any specific questions or something that I'm missing, or you have questions about, I love to delve. I kind of go down the wormhole and figure out what it's going to mean for us in the long run. So if you have any specific questions, feel free to if I send you the email and you're like, hey, what about the coup, the coup in Burkina Faso, or, what's the widening of the Panama Canal going to do for us, or what, whatever it is. And I'll dig into it, and in my next state of the market, I'll put it in the bigger ideas section, and we can dig into that. Or if you just want to call and have a specific question, I'm all ears, because the more that I understand, the better off I am at my job. And I sell tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of pounds of resin a month, plastic, thermoplastics. And so I think I do a lot of that because people know that they can call me and get a straight answer on where things are going, and if they should buy now or hold off and buy later. And I offer all of that to y'all. If y'all hadn't figured it out, I don't mind talking. And so picking up the phone and talking to someone about something that may go down a rabbit hole, love to do it, love to help.
Well, thanks for that. And you'll have an email in your inbox requesting to be added to your newsletter from me and hopefully from some of the others on the phone as well.
Perfect.
Hey, thanks, Cody. I got to jump off for another commitment, but appreciate your time, man. And
You bet. My
your input.
pleasure.
Yep. Take care.
While we wait for other questions to come, can you talk a little bit about you mentioned push towards the green? Can you talk a little bit how that will conflict with the plastics?
Absolutely. So right now, the obvious push in the world is to go as green as we can. And when it comes to plastics currently, very, very, very little plastic is actually wasted on the industrial side. Even on the consumer side, a lot of what is produced that is collected and recycled in large enough recycling centers turns into something, a railroad tie, a plastic post. Sometimes they're chemically treated to create raw materials again. But people love on their products to say, we are recycled. We have recycled content. We have post-consumer recycled content. And that is a big push. And right now I have customers that and I'm talking the injection molders have customers that have end users that are willing to pay up to 50% more to get a comparable material, a polycarbonate, a nylon, a polypropylene, an ABS, a polystyrene, any of these that they can put on their packaging. We use recycled content. We use post-consumer content. And the cost of an ABS resin right now, $1.20 a pound. But the cost of a post-consumer ABS resin could be up to $2 a pound right now. And so the quality is comparable. The supply is not as consistent, but people are willing to pay significantly more to have something that actually says, we are green. What we put in this box is post-consumer plastic. What we wrap your makeup in is post-consumer or recycled. And that's going up. And the demand for that is continuing to grow. I would say that demand has doubled in just the last year. And so I expect that to continue to double sort of on an annual basis for a while, where people are going to be clamoring and saying, please get me something post-consumer so I can say that it's going in to whatever these people are buying, the yard darts, the flashlights, the whatever. People just love that because they feel like they're doing their part, even if from a true green standpoint, it uses more energy, it has a bigger carbon footprint, whatever that may be, all the extra effort, it makes them feel good.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions, team? Who are the industry leaders in the green energy or the renewable energy?
From the energy standpoint, you've got a lot of large multinationals and conglomerates that are just pouring money in, from companies like British Petroleum, which has now renamed themselves Beyond Petroleum, which when you've got an oil company that says it's beyond oil, kind of makes me chuckle. To you've got big players like Devon Energy. They're down here in Texas. They're a big wind farm producer. But there's something really interesting that's going on in the push towards green energy. You've got a lot of hydroelectric where you can have it. That's a pretty saturated market, where, you know, in the Northwest, you've got enough river power to make hydroelectric. But down here where we are in Texas, they're standing up windmills like it's rained and the grass is growing. I mean, they are popping up everywhere. And what they're figuring out, these windmills are supposed to last 20 to 30 years. On average, they're getting less than 10 because they're not holding up to the environment. You'll drive by them and there'll be big oil leaks coming out of them. The recycling of the blades is not anywhere near what people think they can do with it. So when they go finance these projects on a long-term 30-year rate, they're not able to get to the end of the 30 years before they're having to replace the units, whether the drives, the gears, the whole blades, the whole turbine, whatever it is. And so we actually have a lot of wind fields that have been stood up in the last 10, 15 years that are already going through a replacement phase. And they're talking about putting them offshore. And I have no idea how they're going to remotely hold up in that environment. I have salt water on 3 sides of me and it's really bad. You go stand one of these up where the wind blows offshore and the spray gets on them all day, every day. And it's going to be, their lifespan is going to be in the single digits. Solar panels aren't holding up like they should have. I think the next big breakthrough in green energy is going to be a new type of battery system that doesn't rely on things like lithium, where we can do it with an iron or copper or something that's not a rare earth metal, and or be able to convert that to a hydrogen where you can then run it in a fuel cell. But right now, the splitting of the water to create the hydrogen is pretty energy intensive. Or when we finally get our hands wrapped around nuclear fusion, I love that idea because there's no waste. And right now, the United States has every single pound of nuclear waste we have ever produced in storage, not in disposal. It hasn't been disposed of. It's not at its final resting place. It's in storage because the United States has no final resting place or disposal site for nuclear waste. So every pound from the beginning of the production in World War II to what's coming out of the nuclear plants today is still sitting in storage. And that kind of blows my mind that everyone thinks nuclear is such a green energy because it doesn't produce carbon, but we don't know what to do with the waste. So we're just going to put it in a cask and set it out back and figure that out later. That one, I can't, even having a master's in environmental science, I can't wrap my head around that one.
That would be my question. Is it storage that can be withdrawn from?
Yes. So currently, most of the nuclear waste is either held on site at the nuclear facilities or the ones that have been closed down. There's a TCQ and EPA waste disposal facility and nuclear storage site in West Texas, out where West Texas is pretty desertous. And basically they just have big shallow pits in the ground and they have all of these casks of nuclear waste sitting there in storage, paying rent, waiting for its final disposal place. We had Yucca Mountain in Arizona all teed up, ready to go. And that got fought and shot down. And whether it's a good idea or not, I don't know, but we don't have a final resting place for any nuclear waste. It's kind of, I think it's kind of a folly to me. So hopefully someday they figure out what to do, whether they can get it reprocessed, because the spent nuclear fuel does have a lot of residual uranium in it to continue to use. Cost of uranium's like 20 bucks a pound right now, 30 bucks a pound. It's not very expensive. So they're just using new as opposed to going and dealing with this highly radioactive nuclear waste to try and get the reusable fuel out of it. They'll do that at some point. Today's just not the day for it. They don't have the technology figured out yet. So, I mean, who knows? We may be launching it into space. We may be doing something with it. But right now it's just sitting out there in West Texas in the sunshine in a lead and concrete cask, just waiting for something to happen.
Waiting for an opportunity.
Yes.
Well, folks, I think it's 8, actually a little bit past 8. If anybody has any further questions, maybe email them to Cody. And I think this was a wonderful and very, very informative evening, and we really appreciate that. Aaron, do you have something you want to add to close?
Not really. Thank y'all for having me. if there's any questions in particular I can answer, email me. When you email me, I'll send you a reply that I've got it, and my contact information will be on there. Like I tell my teenage kids, when you need to know something, don't text them, pick up the phone and call them. So feel free to pick up the phone and call me and say, hey, you know, what's the price of tea in China got to do with the shipping rate to Japan, and how's that going to affect how I make paper butterflies here in the US? And I'll be happy to try and figure it out.
Thanks, Cody.
Awesome.
Thank you
You
very
bet.
much.
Y'all have a great evening, and thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
enjoy
Thank you very
talking.
much.
Yeah, pleasure being with you tonight. Take care.
All right. Thank y'all.